autofocus. Can we hit that up, please? The Canon C70. I kind of want to categorize this video into two parts. I want to talk about the specs of this camera, and then I want to talk about some of the uses of why I bought this camera in the first place. Come along with. Drink some coffee. Get some coffee. So number one, which was more of a surprise to me than I anticipated it being, is I love the fact that this camera shoots to SD cards. I just recently upgraded to a Mac Studio as my main editing computer, and the fact that that has an SD card slot in the front of it, that is just a match made in heaven for me. It's great because I don't have any dongles when I'm at home. I literally take the media out, plug it straight into the computer, and I can start transferring my footage. So I love the fact that this does shoot to SD cards. That can also be a con because SD cards can be quite expensive. I believe that 256 gig, it's a V90 card, was upwards of $300. The SD cards can get a little out of hand, but if you can put up with that, media is kind of expensive once you start punching up into cinema cameras anyway. It is what it is. It is expensive. That can be a con for sure. But for me, that workflow piece of just being able to go straight into the computer, not having to think twice about it, is huge. So I love the SD cards on this camera. The second and probably the most talked about thing with this camera is the fact that it does have built-in ND filters. So at a click of a button, I have 2 all the way to 10 stops of ND, which is fantastic. It is in increments of 2, so it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, especially for documentary work. If you're doing that, you go from inside to outside, you can just click a couple buttons and your exposure comes right down. I love that capability of this camera. Thirdly, the file sizes and the codecs that this camera can shoot in. You do have XF AVC. You also have RAW internal, but the main codec that I shoot in MP4, and those small file sizes are all recorded in C-Log2. So getting C-Log2 not in a RAW codec and having that ability to push that much color around is fantastic. Our podcast that Nate and I have, we shoot for a good hour and it's less than 100 gigs in that codec in 4K. So I love the file sizes that this thing spits out. The color that it has, the 16 plus stops of dynamic range that it has, just looks absolutely phenomenal. So the codecs and the file size specifically is a huge win for me in picking up this camera. One small thing that is also kind of a con with this camera that a lot of people have talked about is the HDMI port. It is a full-size HDMI, which for me, coming from the R5 and the tiny micro HDMI, is a huge win where it's not a tiny flimsy thing. I do have a small rig cage on this C70 as well as on my R5, and both of them feature a cable clamp, so you don't have to really worry about it getting snapped off. However, I do know that it would be nice to have SDI, especially going into a pterodactyl or something like that. I haven't ran into that yet. I'm not using this on sets where I'm actually in need of a director's monitor or a wireless stream, but I do have the Ninja, and the Ninja has an SDI module. That hasn't been a huge con to me. I know it is for some people, so if you rely heavily on SDI for your workflow, consider that when picking this camera up. But for me, I love the full-size HDMI port. One thing that I absolutely love about this is the 4 channels of simultaneous audio that you can record with this. So on the back, you have 2 manual controls for your preamps. There is mini XLRs, which again can be a con, but it's a simple adapter cable and you'll be rocking and rolling with full-size XLR. So that isn't a huge downside for me either, but the I/O of this camera is ridiculous. At our film company, we do a lot with the Rode Wireless Go packs, and what you can do, because this has 4 channels of audio, is I can run that in to the mic terminal and have both. We have 2 transmitters, so I can have a left and a right individual, 2 people doing a 2-person interview. I can have both of those going into the camera, as well as through the mini XLR, I can have a nice shotgun microphone and have that channel as well as a safety of that channel all running into the video file on this camera, so I don't have to do any syncing in post if I set it up right. So having that 4 channels of audio and that I/O is absolutely a game changer. I do also love the autofocus. It's definitely not as snappy as the R5 is. However, it is still leaps and bounds ahead of other cameras at this price point, as well as the manual focus boosted mode, which is very interesting, and I can make a whole video about that if you guys are interested. But having the autofocus capabilities on this camera, and Canon has updated that to include that in slow and fast mode. So like I said, it's definitely not as snappy as the R5 is. However, it's still rock solid and good enough in 90% of the cases that I've found, especially with RF glass. We have a Sigma 18-35 that I've been using with this camera, and it definitely isn't as solid as an RF lens on this camera. Same goes for stabilization, but the autofocus still works great. It's nice and smooth, and it's something that you can rely on if you know how to use it well. So talking about the uses and why I actually picked up this camera in the first place, a big use for me personally is wedding season coming up. This allows me to roll either with the R5 and set the R5 up on a tripod and go handheld with this, or because this has no record limit, especially for the ceremony, I can set this up on a tripod and go handheld with the R5, get up close and personal as the ceremony's happening, and this is capturing a nice wide from the back. Having two cameras, especially the R5, I can leave that on a gimbal and have this set up on a tripod and go back and forth. My style of wedding shooting is very documentary-esque, so being able to just pick this up, again, have that audio, have the NDs, is so versatile in a setting where your environment's changing. You don't know when you're going to need to roll on something. So having all of that built into this package is phenomenal for weddings specifically. Another reason is I love making these videos. Having a dedicated video camera that's not a hybrid kind of allows me to put my brain more so in a space where I'm just going to focus on video, and the R5 can be just photo. But having a dedicated video camera that has no record limit, I can pull this out, set this up on a tripod, plug it in. I don't even have to run batteries to this like I would in the R5, put media in and hit record and it'll just go. So having a dedicated video camera is a huge game changer to my workflow, specifically having come from the R5 and the mirrorless line that does have that record limit. And thirdly, it's a business investment for me. This is what I do. This is how I make a living. So investing in something like this is key to wanting to step up my production and grow into something even bigger. I have grown into the R5. I'm still pushing its limits, but I've learned, and I've had that camera for a year now, and it's not really too totally different from the DSLR that I had. Before that, I had a 90D, and I even had a T6i before that. So it's all very familiar to me, and that is why I have stuck with Canon. I love the menus. Everything's so user-friendly, as well as I love the color and I love the user experience. And that's what's most important to me about this camera. The cinema menu is very easy to pick up, but I love being able to just pick this up and feel right at home, especially with the image quality grading this. It doesn't take me by surprise. I know exactly how things are going to look. So having two cameras, I can shoot these both in the same color profile and they're gonna match perfect. So that's a huge win in picking up this camera. So between the specs and the uses, this was just a wonderful investment for me at the beginning of this year. It's been a huge game changer for me in terms of workflow. I've loved working with this camera. I feel right at home. It's not too big. I can still use the attachments like this handle that I used on my R5. That carries over. I am more into the RF glass side of things now, so it makes sense to use this with a native RF mount, as well as I'm excited to look at some of the budget anamorphic lenses, take another step forward in ramping up production and image quality. I love the I/O. It has everything I need, and I just love it. Of course, every camera has its quirks, right? And I very much stand by the idea that the best camera to use is the one that you already have. That being said, I'm always looking for ways to step up in production while not getting caught in the trap of, oh, this camera is going to make me a better filmmaker, because that's not reality. Learn how to use the tools that you have. I learned the heck out of the R5 and have used it on so much stuff over the past year, where this is going to marry to that really, really well. It's not going anywhere. I didn't sell it to get this. I still love taking photos. I don't really have that capability with this. So using the two in conjunction is what I'm most excited for. Let me know your thoughts on the C70. I'd love to hear what you think. Did you pick up this camera? Did this video help you in making a purchase decision? I would love to hear all of that. Love to hear your thoughts on the specs, on the uses, what you're using it for. Leave a comment down below, subscribe, click the like button. That helps me out a lot in making these videos so that I can continue to do that. And yeah, get out there and make something.